It's
Yes.
just I'm unclear as to the difference of a door falling off before Shabbos and on Shabbos, according to the different Rishonim. Because the Gemara said that on Shabbos it's muchan agav avihan, but before Shabbos it's also okay, even though ein mechonin agav avihan. Now, so there seems to be a heter on Shabbos of mechonin agav avihan. So now we had three different views in the Rishonim. Some of them say that if it falls off on Erev Shabbos, then it's fine because even if you can just fix it on Motzei Shabbos, it's going to be fine. But others had extra conditions, like it still needs to be a keli. So according to those Rishonim that say it still needs to have some other use, would they agree that actually if it fell off on Shabbos, it would be okay because of this heter of Muchan Agav Avihan, even without the other use?
I think the answer is yes, but let me just spell this out to everyone. So just to I'm just going to I'm just going to mute everyone. Okay. Yeah, we're getting feedback here, infinite feedback chain. Excuse me. So just maybe to your question is a good springboard just to remind ourselves. We saw three explanations as to why the dalet of a keli that falls off is not Muktza. One was the explanation of Rashi, of Tosfos, and presumably the view of Rashi also. That and by the way, also as we saw the Mishnah Berurah paskins this, that even if the dalet is currently unusable, it's not Muktza because it's Obeid Lachziro. Its destiny is to be put back on. It's easily it's due to be put back on, and therefore it's status of a keli. The advantage of this, and this is really what triggered Rashi to say his comments, is that explains the Gemara, in which the Gemara says that if it fell off on Shabbos, in some respects, it's less of a chiddush than if it fell off before Shabbos, because it means at the start of Shabbos it was still part of the keli, and it remains part of the keli. Just because it fell off doesn't mean its status is altered. Its status will be altered if it was permanently broken. But if it's omed, if the assumption is it's going to be put back, it's just a part of the keli that happens temporarily to be separated. Then we saw in the Ran and the Meiri and others that the reason why it is not Muktza is because it is still usable on Shabbos. Not just usable on Shabbos for any use, but it's still usable on Shabbos for the original use, just in a lesser form. So before Shabbos, it was a door on a hinge, an open and closing door. On Shabbos, it ceased to be attached, but it still could be used as a kissoy, as a cover for that opening. Now, in that reading, again, the logic of why it's less of a chiddush that it's not Muktza on Shabbos than if it broke Erev Shabbos is the same as before. Its non-Muktza status is a continuation of its previous status. When Shabbos came in, it was the dalet of a keli, and now that it's detached, it's still the dalet of a keli. It's just less. It's just detached, and therefore it's less of a it's less convenient as a dalet. I have to lift it on and off, but still, its original use still lingers. And therefore, since its original use still lingers, it doesn't become Muktza. It remains in its current status. So both in the first reading, in which the logic of why it's not Muktza is because it's going to be put back, therefore it lingers with the status of keli, it remains with the status of keli, or with the logic of the second reason, the Meiri and others, that it can still be used, it therefore lingers as a keli, and therefore the same svara applies. This last point I just made is explicit in the Meiri. Even though if you look in the Meiri, the reading is a little difficult, and I couldn't quite get my head around every line at every stage in the Meiri. Nonetheless, the Meiri seems to swing a little bit backwards and forwards as to what exact story he's saying. Nonetheless, I think it's clear that this is the broad thrust of the point that the Meiri is making. That this is the broad thrust of the point that the Meiri is making. That its status as a keli lingers because it can still be used as a lid. So that's the second explanation. The third explanation is the Piskei Harid, who, in a manner which, as I said, remains a little unclear whether he means this in practical halacha or not. He says, I can fix it on Shabbos. I could put it back. At least in HaTorah, I'd be allowed to reattach it. And therefore, again, the same svara applies, that it lingers with its status as a keli because it's repairable, not just like Rashi says, because in theory it's repairable, it's only needs to be repaired, but because I could actually repair it on Shabbos. So again, it's the same svara. If you have something that was never a door of a keli or never destined to be a door of a keli, and on Shabbos I decide, let's say I find a mutter way to make it into the door of the keli, it would still be Muktza because currently it's not a keli, it's not the tenet of a keli. The fact that I couldn't make it into a keli, that's not the point. On Shabbos, something has to start on Shabbos as a keli. But says the Spiskei Rid, since it started off Shabbos as a keli and it's fixable, that means it's not on Shabbos itself, it's not irrevocably broken from its status as a keli. So just to summarize, to not be Muktza on Shabbos, to be Muchan on Shabbos, you need, in a sense, I'm going to say it as if it's two conditions, but they really merge into one condition. To be Muchan on Shabbos, it has to be a keli. What would make it a keli? The fact that at the start of Shabbos it was a keli, it was defined as a utensil, number one. And number two, it hasn't been irrevocably ruptured from that situation, from that condition. And what we're learning now is the halachas of rupture. And the chiddush in the Mishnah is that a door that breaks off isn't ruptured from its status as a keli. Why is it not ruptured from its status as a keli? Either because the default thing is that I'm going to reattach it, Tosfos, or because it's still currently usable as a lid, the Miri and the Rad and so on, or because I could actually fix it on Shabbos. It's mutter to fix it on Shabbos. But that's the summary of the sugya. And in all three, we understand why the Gemara says it's more of a chiddush if it broke before Shabbos than if it broke once Shabbos came in. If it broke before Shabbos, you could say, look, this tenuous link to keliness that I could put it back on, or it's only to be put back on, or it could still be used as a lid, isn't enough. Whereas if at the start of Shabbos it achieved the status of keli, and on Shabbos things get more frozen and locked into their halachic status, then the tenuous link that remains is enough to keep it in its halachic status. That's the summary of the Gemara according to all three opinions. Yes, Max?
I don't think this is a further reason, the fourth one, but
yeah.
You want they say that it's melachot acheres. It breaks off, but it's a completely different melachot.
That's a shivrei kelim of Tosfos. That's a shivrei kelim. Tosfos asks, I don't understand. There's shivrei kelim. Seemingly, our Gemara, our Mishnah, is just another example of shivrei kelim. It's something that broke. And with shivrei kelim, the Gemara says the opposite logic. If it broke before Shabbos, it's more of a reason for it to be muchan than if it broke on Shabbos, the other way around. On that, Tosfos answers, and all the Rishonim say a similar answer. There was shivrei kelim, it's not becoming Muktza because it still has a functionality and not a melacha acheres. Whereas over here, the logic is it still has the original functionality, the continued functionality. How does it have all the machlokes between the three families of Rishonim is about how does it still have its original functionality? Either because I'm going to put it back, or because it currently has that functionality, or because on Shabbos I'm allowed to reattach it and give it that original functionality. But all of them are arguments for it never losing its actual specific original functionality. With shivrei kelim, it does lose its original functionality. The chiddush of shivrei kelim are broken pieces of porcelain or whatever, is that since they started off Shabbos as a keli, they still have a functionality, albeit a new functionality, that would be enough to keep it as a keli. So it's you're right. There's a fourth svara. The fourth svara though applies to shivrei kelim. Not Delos's kelim also have that, but they have more than that. They still have the original functionality. That's the point of all three Rishonim. And if I originally said differently, then I said wrongly. I am aware that in the first year, as I said, I got myself into a little bit of a muddle. I'm not even sure what happened there and why and in what ways. I haven't done a post-mortem, so it's possible I said something wrong in the original share. And as I said, I did my best to conceal it. But okay. So that's that's really a summary of the sugya, and I hope that addresses your point. Now, there's many questions that. Sorry, yeah.
The definition of Masechet.
Yes.
That changes things because.
The Piskei Rid is difficult to understand, but his basic logic is that something which is reattachable without any particular skill or effort, number one, and it's not mechuber l'karka, it's only a keli, which, as we saw, is anyway a weaker form of binyan, is mutter to do on Shabbos. He either means it's literally mutter, or he means it wouldn't be a melachot d'oraisa. But either way, his argument here is that since it's permissible in some shape or form to reattach the door, why is it permissible? Because A, it's only a keli, it's not actually a real building, binyan, that's mechuber l'karka, and B, it can be done without skill, therefore there's no skill in doing it, therefore it doesn't cross the threshold binyan at least bin Torah, and therefore I actually could reattach it on Shabbos, and therefore that's not that's why it's not Muktza, because I in the real world I could at least bin Torah reattach it. Yeah. One way of saying this, if you just want a little piece of Lomdus, just us to do a bit of Chazara in Perek Klal when we're learning the melachos, is that around all of the melachos there's a sort of tension of what makes something a melacha. Model number one is the significance of it being a melacha is outcome based. Model number two is it's human engagement based. What makes a melacha is my involvement, my hitzaskut, my involvement and engagement with it. If you want to give this yeshivish terminology, model number one is mitzad the chefta, mitzad the object that I'm producing. That's what makes it a melacha. Model number two is mitzad the governor, mitzad the free agent, the human, the person who's involved in the activity. One way of reading the Piskei is that he's saying the following. He says to be a building, to be boiner of a significant enough outcome to be chayav min haTorah, it has to be a real building. I've created a building. Sticking pieces together to make a utensil is not a choshev enough outcome to be the melacha of boiner, unless it's the melacha because of the human engagement with it. What makes it a melacha because of the human engagement? A Masechet. It's not just slotting pieces together, but it's a craftsman type activity of putting things together. So if you have one of the two, then you have boiner min haTorah. If you have neither, then it's not boiner min haTorah. So if it's a building, you're reattaching a door to a building that fell off, it's boiner because it's mechuber l'karka, it's a building that's made, what we call mitzad b'chefta, because of the object, the outcome that's created. If it's a keli, it doesn't have such a significant outcome, it's just a utensil. But if the activity, the engagement is one of a craftsman piecing things together to construct things, then the activity of construction makes it a boiner. But here there's no activity of construction either, because it's not a Masechet, it's just slotting something in together that any idiots can do. That wouldn't be, therefore it wouldn't be the melacha of boiner. That's a quick chazar of some of the ideas we spoke about when we learned melachas. That to be a melacha is engagement with a significant activity, but there's one of two things that, at least in theory, we could think about with each melacha that makes it an engagement with a significant activity. Either the outcome causes it to be an engagement with a significant activity, or the hitzaskut, my involvement with it makes it an engagement with a significant activity. I'll tell you a story. I learned Masechet Shabbat many years ago under my Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Zobin, and there was one point in Shabbos that when I twigged that ASEC, involvement, activity, engagement is such a crucial part of the whole of Shabbos. And I sort of went charging into my Rosh Yeshiva in great excitement to share that insight with me and with him, and he was, okay, good, well, please you'll sort of got it. About 3 years ago, I was in the story happens 15 years ago at least, and about 3 years ago I was in Eretz Yisrael visiting, and I went into my Rosh Yeshiva to speak to him in learning, and he was happened to be learning a sukkah. And I came and he said, "Oh, Rabbi, come in," and then he said, "We're learning the sukkah of ASEC," and he gave me this big grin. Learning the sukkah of Saskas again. So this is what it means to be mechanech, carrying mechanech. Even though for him this was obvious. I mean, this was the ABC of Shabbos. He remembered my delight in cupping this, and that stuck in his mind that there was a delight in cupping this. So engagement is an important Shabbos word. If you don't hear the word engagement, one gets caught up in all sorts of paradoxes of Shabbos. What is a melacha? Is a melacha a creative outcome? An outcome doesn't make something a melacha. If you do it with the shino, if you do it with the groma, if you do it with is it an action? Actions don't make something a Shabbos. You can schlep furniture up and down the whole day and it wouldn't be a melacha. It's engagement with a creative activity. It's uskut and asek and involvement that makes something Shabbos. The only Mishnah that I'm aware of who uses the language of asek is I found Rabbi Chanana once in Masechet Shabbat actually uses that word. But for me, at least, it's the best word to sort of bring out the numbers that we're saying. It's engagement with a significant activity, with a creative activity that makes it Shabbos. And a big chakira that you have throughout Masechet Shabbat is always analysing what makes something a significant engagement with the melacha. Is it mitzad the chayfetz, the object that's produced the outcome, or is it mitzad the government, mitzad my involvement with the activity? Okay, so this is either way. That's an aside. That's in Karen, in answer to your question, that's the explanation of this Piskei that it has its ability to actually reattach it that makes it a melacha. Now, again, in all three Rishonim, the point is that the door still remains a keli somehow or other. The keliness of the door lingers, either because its default setting is I will reattach it, or because in practical halacha I could, or because it still has the use. So this generates a number of questions which actually came out of the discussions as we were having Shiur over the last few weeks. I think someone asked what happens if it's never been part of a keli. I planned to attach the door. Would that be enough, even though it was never part of a keli? Then we had the question about difficulty of reattaching it. At what point does it cross the threshold of difficulty reattaching that ceases to be omed? This would affect the halacha of a button that falls off, your jacket or Shabbos. Is the button omed to be reattached, but we need sewing to reattach? And finally, a question I don't think we discussed, but we're going to look at also is what would happen in the case of a delet. Part of what's unique about the delet is that it's not shivrei kelim, it's not just a shard or something like that, but also that the keli remains usable. The keli itself hasn't become useless. The door has become detached from a keli, but I still have a usable keli with which to reattach it. What happens if the break is such that both halves are useless? How would that affect the londas? So I don't have a cupboard with a door, where the cupboard is still a perfectly good cupboard, just the door is detached, and therefore the question I need to ask myself is the door Muktza, or can it not be Muktza because it still remains linked to the cupboard's usefulness? But what happens if the cupboard itself has become useless? The parent keli has also become useless through the breaking process, but I could easily reattach them, and then it would go back to its original functionality. So this is the next topic I want to talk about. And the reason I want to talk about this isn't because I'm just trying to throw more information and more sources here, but because it's just another way of doing chazorah and really playing out the difference between the three explanations of the three families of Rishonim. Because as we work it through, it's going to really be dependent on these three schools of thought, how we understand the topic. So, yeah. Yeah.
What if you use the door some other purpose on Shabbat? In other words, as a tray.
So if I use the door as that, no problem. It's not Muktza. I can use it for what I want. If I can only use the door for that, then we get back to Max's point and Shivrei kelim. I'm trying to stop it being Muktza because of a new usefulness. Very nice, but that's not our londas. That's not our sugya. Yeah. Yes, but if it's not Muktza, then I can, like any non-Muktza entity, I can use it for anything I want. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so really, I all I did in the source sheets that I sent late last night was find two other Gemaras which discuss similar scenarios and are somewhat analogous to our sugya. One was the case of a kira, an oven of sorts, where a leg or two break, and now that the legs are broken, it's unusable, and it's ostensibly somewhat analogous to our sugya in the sense that you can easily reattach the legs to make it functional, but it's different to our sugya in the sense that in the meantime it's useless. So when a door breaks off the object, the cupboard remains useful, it just doesn't have a door. When the legs break off, I'll give you the example that Shulchan Aruch gives. When the legs break off a chair, the chair is useless at the moment now. So on the other hand, it's reattachable. It's a scenario where it's easily reattachable. It's not like a metal leg has broken where you have to weld it or whatever. It's just a leg that's slots back in, let's say, into the chair. So it's only made to be reattached. It doesn't take a Masechet Shabbat to reattach it. It's not complicated to do. Nonetheless, at the moment now, not just is the door broken, but the original object usable, but even the original object is unusable. How would Halacha judge that situation? So that's sugya number one, and that's the Gemara in Kuf Lamed Ches, which I printed. In Kuf Yud Beis, I printed another Gemara, which I probably should have given a word of warning about because it's a bit of a complicated Gemara, and I don't want people to have to spend too long on it. But I'll just summarize the Gemara. Basically, it's a situation where you have a sandal where the straps have snapped. And therefore, it's another example of something which in the Gemara appears to be similar to our own. It's easily reattachable, but in the meantime, depending how many straps have snapped, it may be unusable. And again, you have the same question as to how Halacha would deal with that. So those are the two Gemaras. And all I really want to do is just, in a sense, whatever you got from those Gemaras, great. But I would suggest humbly that it's worth working through at least source one properly, because that Gemara is shorter and more accessible. Source two is a little bit harder. then source 3 and 4 are worth working through because they are halacha l'maisa, and I do want to get to practical halacha out of all of this. So if you didn't do so already, look at source 1, miss out source 2. I'll just summarize it for you because it's complicated, and then definitely learn 3 and 4, which are Mishnah Shulchan Aruch, the Mishnah Berurah that get this to practical halacha. But let's just try and draw out what we can from those Gemaras, and I think they're just a nice way of bringing out the difference between the 3 pathways in our sugya. You look like you're waiting to say something. Sorry.
What's the status of the leg?
Good question. That is the question. What is the status of the leg, and what is the status of the original article, and to what degree is our sugya applicable? Now, on a factual level, the leg is, unlike the door, would appear to be unusable for now. On the other hand, and therefore, I'm just saying for facts, at the moment, just the facts first of all, we'll come to halachic reasoning. It appears that the leg is unusable for now. On the other hand, it would appear that it is reattachable and omeid to be reattached. And the evidence that it's omeid to be reattached is because there's another gezerah floating around, which is not relevant to our because we're not going to go into it, which says, don't move the thing because we're worried that you're going to reattach the leg. So this is why, again, I mean, let's just have a quick look at the Gemara, and then we'll try and work through this and understand how halacha applies. So the Gemara's on Kuflav, thank you for the printing the source sheets for me. The Gemara's on, lensing them to me anyway. The Gemara's on Kuflav and Chesam and base, and it says it's talking about this appliance where one of the legs has broken. Yakusel means it's yerech, it's thigh. Rashi says it means it's legs. And the Gemara says you're allowed to move it. If 2 legs are broken, then you're not allowed to move it. Then Rav says even if only 1 leg has broken, you're not allowed to move it in case, as a gezerah, in case you reattach the leg. Okay. So Rav says that if 1 leg is broken, you shouldn't move it because of the gezerah in case you reattach it. We're not going to worry about that. That's not, for now at least, we won't worry about that. That's not Hilchos Muktza. That's something else. That's a special gezerah. At least for now, that we'll ignore Rav. We'll come back to him later because it'll turn out more relevant. We realise, but for now, we're not focusing on that. However, the Tanna Kamma is an interesting one. The first source in the Brisa. So the Brisa says that if 2 legs are broken, you can't move it. It's also to move for some reason or other. If 1 leg is broken, you can move it. So Rashi says the reason you can move it if only 1 leg is broken is because why not? So, what would be the problem? We're not worried about you fixing it, and it's not Muktza, and therefore you can move it. If 2 legs are broken, you can't move it, says Rashi, because in the case of 2 legs being broken, we're worried that you will fix it. In other words, even the Tanna Kamma is worried in the case of 2 legs where it's unusable that you'll fix it on Shabbos, and therefore forbade midrabanan, a special gezerah, not to move it. So this is one reading of the Gemara. Now, 1 leg where it's still usable, it's just a bit wobbly, it's neither Muktza nor are we worried about you repairing it. Where 2 legs are broken, we're worried about you repairing it, and even the Tanna Kamma says you're worried about you repairing it. Rabbeinu Chananel, in contrast, and similarly the Meiri, says that you're not allowed to move it because it's Muktza, because it doesn't have a Torah's Keli on our underlined Adam in the sheet that you gave me, and spot on. That's exactly what you should have noticed and underlined. That they say the reason you can't move it when 2 legs are broken is because when 1 leg's broken, it's wobbly. When 2 legs are broken, it's Muktza. So just to summarize, the drill down to the core detail I want to bring out from this, what we have effectively is a Gemara that says that when an oven's 2 legs are broken, you're not allowed to move it. Rashi says the reason you're not allowed to move it is because of the new gezerah Shema Yitzka. The Rabbeinu Chananel and the Meiri say you're not allowed to move it because it's Muktza. So Rashi doesn't say it's Muktza, basically. Rashi evidently holds that even though it's broken, 2 legs are broken and it's not usable, nonetheless it's not Muktza. And therefore Rashi says it's because of this new gezerah. Rabbeinu Chananel and the Meiri say the reason you can't is because it doesn't have a Torah's Keli there. That's the summary of what I wanted to bring out from the Gemara. Again, I would urge all of you, these sources are worth learning, even leave out source 2 in hindsight. Maybe it was a little overly complicated, but that's why I wanted to bring out from source 1. All I want to ask now is, according to Rashi, why is it not Muktza? According to Rabbeinu Chananel, why is it yes Muktza? And I'm simply going to argue that this is just another ramification of our previous discussion. Sorry, Gary.
Which is usually a halacha case, just on the second line. I'm just wondering how that fits in, as opposed to wanting to move it because you want it in a different place.
Mutter the Talmud of Sorech Mekoma means that it's still a keli, albeit one that has a degree of Muktza associated with it. But it's still a keli. It hasn't lost Torah's keli. We'll get to Klisha Melachot and Issa later on in the Perek. But for now, Mutter Natalta L'Soch Makoma means it hasn't ceased to be a kli. Basically, there's two types of Muktza, two levels of Muktza, even though colloquially we call both of them Muktza. One is my hammer scenario, which is Muktza in the sense that since it's by default used for knocking nails in, therefore I can't move it on Shabbos. If I do need to move it to L'Soch Makoma or to use it to hammer coconut, it's not Muktza because it's still a keli. Put it in Lomdish terminology because that's what we're learning over here. Torah's keli are now. And that's what the Rabbi Zobin says where one leg is broken. The second scenario is something which is completely useless, a stone or a rock, or possibly broken keli where both legs are broken, in which it's completely muks, and therefore I can't even move it to Tzorech Makoma because ein Torah's keli are now. Yeah, yes. So from a halachic point of view, though, in the interest of our discussion, Torah's keli are now, it's still a keli. Yeah, okay. So in brief, everyone agrees if only one leg is broken, unless you're worried about the gezerah of that you might repair it, it's not muktzah because it's still usable, it's just a bit wobbly. Everyone agrees when both legs are broken, it's unusable. Yet, Rabbi Zobin says, therefore it's muktzah, and the Meiri says, therefore it's muktzah, and Rashi says, no, it's not muktzah, it's just there. Everyone would agree that there's a gezerah that you might fix it. So why would the two-leg broken scenario be muktzah, and why would it not be muktzah? So, well, actually, that's not a rhetorical question. I'll take a breather here and hand over the rest of Shiur to you, Rabbi Zobin. What would be the argument to say is muktzah? What would be the argument to say it's not muktzah?
It loses its status of Torah kli.
Why would it lose its status as Torah's kli? And why wouldn't it? Why would there be a machlokes shown over here?
Because it's physically, the oven itself could stand on the three legs.
That's in the case where it's got three legs, but where it's lost two legs, so the oven can't stand at all. The oven is useless now. Why would it be muktzah? Why wouldn't it be muktzah?
It's the same as that tomorrow. You say, is it currently usable?
Yeah.
Or did it have the status of first key which I was doing?
Yeah, it depends on the machlokes we're showing. If again in our Gemara we said that when the door breaks off, it's not muktzah. Why is it not muktzah? Some Rishonim, also known as Tosfos and probably Rashi, say the reason it's not muktzah is even if it's currently useless, but when Shabbos came in, it was a keli, and I'm planning to reattach it, and it will go back, omeid, to go back to being a keli. Therefore, it's muchan agavaviyam, and therefore it's not muktzah now. So that's Rashi consistent over here. This is evidence that we read Rashi correctly. Rashi says the oven is currently useless. Both legs are broken. Nonetheless, it's not muktzah because it's omeid to be reattached, and therefore it's muchan agavaviyam. The alternative viewpoint, one way of explaining the alternative viewpoint would be, no, it's currently useless. With the door, as the Meiri said, by the way, again, the Meiri consistent, with the door, the Meiri said the point is that I can still use it as a door. It's just a less good door because it's off the hinges, but I can still use it as a cover. Whereas over here with the legs, at the moment now, it's useless. There's no use I could give it to, and therefore it's lost its Torah's keli, even though it's only made to be repaired. So that's one way of reading the machlokas. That is simply is what we call in sort of Lomdish terminology, l'shitoso. Is each rishon consistent with the view? Rashi is consistent with his view that the reason it's not muktzah is because it's only to be repaired, agavavian, even though currently it's useless. And the Meiri is consistent with his view. Look at the source sheets again, you'll see the Meiri was the middle position. He said the reason it's not muktzah is because it's currently useless, and therefore it's currently useful. The door can still be used as a lid, and therefore in this case it's useless.
Migdal or the ikar, and what we're talking about is the tafel, is the door. Here, the tafel are the legs, not the kira.
So for now, you're right to point that point, and the next year we'll look at that. For now, I'm ignoring that point, and I'm assuming it's symmetrical. The fact is the oven and the legs are both useless without each other, and therefore it would be muktzah. In next year, we'll unpick whether the lomdus of the door not being muktzah is because it's agavavian, where there's still a parent keli, which is a keli, whereas in the oven case, there's no parent keli, and that's why it would be muktzah. And that would be a second suggestion as to why Rabbi Zobin and the Meiri over here think it's muktzah. Rashi says, I don't care whether the parent is currently useful or not. The whole logic is conceptually I can reattach it, and therefore it's not muktzah. Maybe Rabbi Zobin would say, I don't care about conceptually. The parent keli is muktzah in this case, and therefore it would be different to the door. So your point is well taken, but we will flesh this out in the next. Your joint point is well taken, and we'll reflect it later. Yes, Max.
I might be missing something here. Surely with an oven, it's
Yeah.
used from a lot of cooking.
Yes.
But not make
That's why it's like the hammer. That's the answer to Gary's question of why it's like the hammer. Yeah. But for now, I'm ignoring those distinctions. All I'm focusing on is does it have a Torah's keli or not? And the answer is as a Torah's keli, because it's a utensil, even if it happens to be an appliance that I can or can't use on Shabbos. It seems it's a sort of keli that was movable, yeah. Yeah, it's a small one, yeah. It's a little thing, yeah. Yeah. Okay, we'll stop here then for today, and Emir Tashem resume. Just the plan, sorry, just to take everyone clear, Adam, will you remind us what's happening with learning over the next few weeks?
Next Sunday.
So next Sunday is the last Shiur,
Right.
and the seasonal break.
And it's to start again Tuesday after New Year.
So January the 3rd will restart. Fine. Okay. Thank you very much. Cheers. And thank you, Adam, by the way, for ongoing running this. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.